Good morning. My name is Michal Čižlavský and I work as press attaché at the Embassy of the Czech Republic in London. I would like to welcome you at the next episode of CZEXPATS Interviews. Our today's guest is the former director of BBC World Service, Sir John Tusa. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Michal.
Could you tell us how did you and your family get to the United Kingdom?
Yes, we came in 1939. My father was sent to be the general manager of what was called the British Bata Shoe Company in Tilbury on the Essex marshes. He was a young man, but he was spotted by the founder of the Bata Shoe Company, Thomas Baťa, as a bright executive. He came over in about May, June of 1939. He then waited for a visa to be issued for his wife and myself and my brother, and there was no visa apparently available. So after about 6 weeks, he said to the chairman of the company, I am returning to Czechoslovakia. This was in the summer of 1939. The chairman said, why? And my father said, if you're not interested enough to get a visa for my parents, I'm not interested enough to work for you here. And various strings were pulled, and they were pulled, and visas were produced, and we came over in July 1939 by train and by boat from Harwich. So it was because my father was appointed to a job here, and that was how we came. It was certainly very last minute. I was 3.5.
How was growing up in the United Kingdom during the Second World War for you as for a young Czech expatriate?
Well, it began because we were living on the Bata estate. And that had a lot of Czech families on it because the Bata Shoe Company was very largely run by Czech executives who were sent from Zlín in Moravia, in Morava, to run the company in England. So there was a large Czech community, and it felt very Czech. But apparently quite early on, I said to my mother when she was speaking to me in Czech in public in front of my English friends, don't speak to me like that again, speak to me in English. Shortly after that, we moved, not for that reason, to a house slightly far away. And my upbringing was completely British because I was sent to a boarding school. And my parents throughout, you must remember, in 1940, you didn't know how long the war was going to last. So they thought very sensibly, it's very necessary that we should be as British as possible, and certainly that our sons should be brought up to be British. So I never really spoke Czech. I spoke English. And so I was expected to assimilate. I was perfectly happy to assimilate, and it made life very much easier to assimilate. To have a slightly odd name, which we changed from Jan Tusa to John Tusa, which is also slightly complicated, but not as complicated as Tusa to English ears. Otherwise, the assimilation was intended, rightly, I think, to help me and my brother to be as a normal part of British society.
So do you still speak some Czech at all?
Yes, I speak a certain amount of Czech if I'm in the Czech Republic, which I love. I can certainly make my way around. I will never get lost. I can certainly order food. I would never speak it in polite company because I don't know which words I have are horrible slang, and some of them I suspect are very rude because I picked them up from my uncle when I was 7 and 8. So I keep it to myself, but it is very, very useful in the Czech Republic. And incidentally, it also helps when I'm in other parts of Eastern Europe. And I actually love the sound of the Czech language. My parents had a lot of Czech friends. They entertained a lot. And for me, the sound of the Czech language, and after all, these sounds are very important, has always been the sound of conviviality and enjoyment and friendship. So it is there. I'm very proud that I have it. I'm sorry that I don't know it better, but that was how life panned out. But I certainly know quite a lot, probably more than I would care to admit to you or to anybody else.
Let's move on, and I would like to ask you about your career after graduating from the Cambridge University and your military service. You have started working for the BBC, and my question is, has journalism always been your dream, and what has drawn you to this kind of career?
I think journalism only became a dream when I was at Cambridge University. Before that, I vaguely thought of other things, but not very seriously. And then various friends, very good friends, were thinking of a career in the BBC, and that seemed rather attractive. It combined broadcasting, public service broadcasting, or the idealism of public service broadcasting, and journalism as well. And so that was the path that I followed, and I was lucky enough to be chosen as a graduate trainee by the BBC, and I joined in 1960. And I'm always very glad and very fortunate that I've had a career in journalism where I was able to use my degree, which was in history.
Your career for the BBC was actually quite formidable, and from, as you mentioned, an intern, a trainee, you've managed to rise to the director, to the position of a director of the BBC World Service. How was your journey to BBC as for a Czech immigrant?
Well, the thing is that when I went to Bush House to be managing director, which was comparatively late on, I mean, I think that I got the job of managing director BBC World Service because I was Czech, or rather because it was known that I had, let's call it, an international background. And certainly because I'd worked in the World Service at Bush House for a certain amount of time, because I grew up with the sound of broken English in my ears, because my parents spoke with a, Czech English accent to their dying day. I'll put it this way: I have always liked foreigners. I'm not frightened of foreigners, and I went to Bush House, and Bush House was full of people speaking English as their second language. So I felt terribly at home. And I think that the people at Bush House from 50 different nationalities also rather appreciated the fact that their managing director was somebody whose second language was also foreign and who was not born in that country. So actually, having a Czech background in all sorts of respects was very useful and made life very, very much easier and much, much more pleasant. Some people, I think, are frightened in this country. Some people are frightened of foreigners. I'll put it this way: I never was. I've always felt at home, and that's why I felt at home in the BBC World Service.
After retiring from the BBC, you have tried various managerial jobs in different cultural institutions, as, for example, the Barbican. How was this experience different from journalism?
It was different only in the sense that the subject matter was different, but actually managing people, managing an organization, working with senior colleagues to get an organization to work in a particular way, to improve the way that it worked, to live up to its ideals, shall we say, and also having had to fight for the funding for the BBC World Service from the government, the knowledge that especially at the Barbican, where we were also publicly funded, it was necessary to make the case for funding. In other words, to fight for the institution. So that was a very useful carryover. And for the rest, the experience of management, I think, was just extremely useful. That when you're the managing director, you're the boss only in the sense that you carry final responsibility for the organization. You're not a boss in any other way, or if you think you are, then you are making a great mistake. And I certainly wasn't the boss in that sense. If I personified at Bush House what the World Service stood for, that was good. And I hope I carried that over to my work at the Barbican as well.
In 2003, you were awarded with knighthood from the Queen. How exactly did you earn this honor, and did it change your life in any way?
Well, see, one of the things about the British honours system is you have no idea how you got it. You don't apply for it. Your friends don't tell you if they've recommended you for it. And to this day, I have no idea who put my name forward for it. Now, the citation, so to say, goes for services to the arts. Well, I was involved in the Barbican Centre, of course. I think that I also probably got it because I always stood up for the arts against the government. And when the government was cutting arts funding, then I was always ready to fight for funding, to fight for excellence in the arts, and to speak up for the arts. So I would like to think that that was one of the reasons that friends, whoever they are, who put me forward for this great honor of a knighthood, they took those things into account. More than that, I don't know. Did it change my life? No, I don't think so. I don't think so. My wife always said, look, you got this honor and that's very nice. But remember, in life, you should travel through life as lightly as possible. In other words, you don't suddenly think that you are more important because you have got a Sir to your name. You're still the same person as you were before. I think that was very good advice. I hope that I have followed it. It's a great honor, but it is just that. It doesn't change anything about me.
I think it's a great lesson for everyone. And I have one last question. What would you, after all this experience, recommend to young Czech journalists at the beginning of their road that are looking up to your career and would like to follow your footsteps?
Well, I'm assuming that these would be Czech journalists in the Czech Republic. And I would suggest, and I hope I have followed it, to be as informed, knowledgeable, curious, expert in your field as possible, whatever it is. And certainly to avoid any kind of pressure from governments or from pressure groups. The only point of being a journalist is if you can be independent and responsible because you are working for your audience, whether on television or on radio. It's a great discipline. It can be a great life. It can be very, very rewarding. Examining facts, trying to bring some understanding to them, and helping an audience to understand them too. I think I have found it that is a good way of spending my life, and I would recommend it.
Thank you very much for sharing your experience. I would like to thank you for your time, and I will be looking forward to seeing you again.
Thank you very much, Michal. It's been a great pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
I would like to also thank to everyone watching, and I will be looking forward to seeing you at the next episode of CZEXPATS Interviews. Have a nice day. Goodbye. Our today's